Welcome back to part 2 of the Cocoa and Croissant video. Don't forget you can watch some examples of a Cocoa and Croissant conversation on this link. So, is grammar important? Well, yes, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Can you have a conversation with no grammar? Sure. Here's an example of a conversation I had just now in the office. Is this correct Queen's English? Hell no. Is the meaning clear? Yeah. Is it authentic British English? Of course it is. You see, we're not aiming for our students to give a TED talk or to summarise a doctoral thesis. They will mainly only need to focus on simple grammar and short phrases. So here's some examples of the grammar that you should focus upon. A lot of conversation is storytelling, and stories do tend to happen in the past tense. So we'll need a command of present and past simple to talk about habits and to tell a story. Possibly also past continuous to give a narrative. Continuous and perfect aspects you will always going to need in conversation. To talk about what you've been doing, to talk about your experiences. You're going to need modal verbs. As we discussed before, questions, also instructions to speak. Basic conjunctions, and, so, but. These are the three magic words which prompt a student to expand. I am hungry, so I ate an apple. But it wasn't enough, and I was still hungry, so I ate an orange, etc., etc. You can use these three words to string together sequences and to expand on what the student is saying. Also, perhaps quoting expressions could be good. He said, then I said. This is really the only grammar you need to focus on to facilitate a fluent conversation. With students from two different countries and cultures, comparing and contrasting are great skills to have. I mean, the whole point of these kids visiting Britain is to learn that there are differences, but at the end of the day, we're all very similar. If we go back to our London versus Paris example, we can use some of the words from this Venn diagram. See if you can pick out the comparing and contrasting words from the Venn diagram. By the way, your keyword for this video is cabbage. Please make a note of it. So see if you can pick out the comparing and contrasting phrases from the Venn diagram. Listen to this. Instead of arrondissement, like Paris, London has boroughs. But London boroughs are similar to Paris, because they're each like little towns with their own unique character. Not only are all the areas different, but each district has its own mix of cultures. In fact, many people consider words to be not the most important part of communication. Yes, there's non-verbal communication like eye contact, gestures, tone and body language. There's a lot of talk on the internet about 93% of communication being non-verbal. But the best thing to do is to make sure that there's no pressure on your students and that they're well prepared. They're seated at an angle to each other, not directly opposite. There's already a buzz of noise in the room so they don't feel self-conscious, and nobody's pushing a camera into their face until they're confident. Context is key. But Cocoa and Croissant conversations are going to be out of context. Think about it. Two people on a bus stop. They can discuss the weather and the local bus service. Two people in a sports bar can chat about the game. Two parents waiting at the school gate, what do they talk about? They discuss their kids, of course. There's a shared context. But in Cocoa and Croissant, there really isn't. So the student must be able to relate to the topic, and the topic must be familiar. Some prior knowledge that they can connect with. They can access the data in their brain about a topic and absorb new information If the students choose a general topic which everyone is familiar with, like family, hobby, pets, food, maybe pop culture, it's more likely that the two students will be able to find shared experiences and a connection of which they both have prior knowledge. And you know, it also helps greatly if these students already know each other. Emotional factors play a huge part in a student's willingness to communicate. Who wants to talk about a topic which makes us angry or embarrassed or stressed? Students won't want to discuss topics which they're sensitive about in their own culture either. So you must be super sensitive to the parsnip. I love the parsnip. PARSNIP is an acronym for politics, alcohol, race, sex, narcotics, isms, and within isms I would also include religion, Buddhism, Catholicism, Islam, and finally pork. However cute the pig looks, pork can be offensive in some cultures. Now, these are potentially sensitive subjects within certain cultures, but unfortunately they also tend to be the most stimulating conversation topics. So I'm not saying don't discuss these topics, just be sensitive. Sul are not going to be sympathetic if we get offended complaints from parents, so watch it, yeah? So now let's look at some practical ideas to get these chunks of prefabricated language drilled and automatic among your students. This activity here drills students in predicting with different levels of probability. Drill the target language chorally until it sounds automatic. You'll definitely dum-dum-dum. You'll probably dum-dum-dum. There's a good chance you'll dum-dum-dum. Perhaps you'll dum-dum-dum. And change the personalised dum-dum-dum words in a substitution drill. Drill it chorally until it's automatic. And then you place the students in pairs and they tell each other's fortune. After each stage, offer feedback, change the pairings, run the activity again, and again, and again, until automatic. Don't intervene. Let the students talk, let them make their own mistakes. Walk around, keep your ears open, make a note of a selection of typical errors in your notebook while you're wandering around. After the first stage, write the errors that you've heard up on the whiteboard and ask the students to correct them in groups or pairs. Then repeat again and again and again.
On the phone. Sorry.
After teaching and drilling the language functions, in this case, greeting, offering, accepting, refusing, persuading, give the students a flow diagram and have them role play the dialogue. Like before, feedback, repeat, automatic, automatic. Or you could speak a dialogue. Students listen and decide which flowchart matches your dialogue. You don't need a recording, use your own voice for both parts. And then students can work together and identify the words you use to greet, offer, accept, invite, and so on. In the picture, they have to choose the correct conversation pattern, A, B, or C, and this helps them notice the chunks of prefabricated language that you want them to use. Then they make their own dialogues. Then they make their own conversation patterns as a flowchart, and they swap them around. It's great for visual learners. Lovely exercise. Disappearing dialogue is great, and this is a task that I use a lot. Make up a two-person dialogue, perhaps 8 lines, 10 lines long, which includes all the language functions that you want to drill. Pause this video now and read this paragraph from Scott Thornberry's How to Teach Speaking. Okay, next you can use linguistic prompts, like a bingo card. Pre-teach the chunks of language using disappearing dialogue, using drills such as above. pre-teach these chunks of language, and then 2 students will improvise a dialogue using the language that they've learned. 2 other students listen, and then the listeners check off the target phrases on a bingo card as they hear them. Find someone who is always a good exercise. Give students a list of questions written as prompts like this. The idea is to collect as many names amongst your classmates as possible, whilst constructing mini dialogues in pairs. The students all stand up, mill around and talk to the whole class. Have you ever eaten some unusual food? Yeah. Cool. What did it taste like? It was insects in Bangkok. They tasted very salty. At the end of the task, students feed back to the class by saying, who is this person? This person has never seen a ghost, but they've ridden a motorcycle in Spain with their brother. And the class then guess the identity of the student. Give students a problem to solve, like this negotiation. Drill the language that they need to solve the problem and just let them work it out on their own in pairs. If you want this game, let me know and I'll email it to you. The prefabricated chunks of language for negotiation might be something like this, but you can make up some more, I'm sure. So, to summarise, here are the keys to a great cocoa and croissant preparation. To facilitate an unscripted conversation, you need to decide what language functions you want your students to focus on, and then teach them the ready-made, prefabricated chunks of language they need to perform these functions. So you're building a conversation like you're building a Lego Death Star. Drill, 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 repeat, 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 automatic, automatic, automatic. And once these phrases are in the students' minds, they'll be able to say them on autopilot, and this frees up their brain to fill in all the gaps with spontaneous, personalised conversation from their own perspective. Using lots of controlled practice, drill the students into repeating, repeating, repeating these phrases until they're confident and fluent. Don't be afraid to rerun dialogues and role plays until they're polished and perfect. After each run through, give feedback. Allow the students to self-correct their errors or to correct in groups or pairs. Then run it again. Then run it again. Think about the functions your students are most likely to need in a cocoa and croissant conversation. Giving and asking for opinions, agreeing, disagreeing. These are the cornerstone of any conversation, I think. Stretching out the conversation by making the students give examples squeezes every drop of English out of them. Drilling students into asking lots of questions stimulates conversation. Otherwise, it's just 2 students giving a monologue. Remember the mantra, tell me about, tell me about. But stick to safe, familiar and comfortable topics that everybody all around the world can relate to, regardless of culture, and you'll get better results. The students are young and they're from different cultures, so they may not have your experience of the world and life, and they may look at the world from a different perspective. They need to have some prior knowledge of the topic that you're asking them to discuss, or they won't have anything to say. Make the environment as comfortable as possible and as stress-free as you can. Students sitting at a comfortable distance with good eye contact, no cameras in their face, and don't put them on the spot. And finally, encourage them to find out the differences that they have, but also what makes us all the same. Cocoa and croissants. It's more than just empty calories. Go and have a look at some examples and get your students to do the same. If you want any further information about this video, or if you want to read Scott Thornberry's brilliant book, please contact me. Thanks for watching now.